Transaxle remove and refit. To remove a transaxle, you'll need the front of the vehicle in a wheel-free condition, so a two-post lift like this is ideal. Start by disconnecting the battery, negative terminal first. Then, working on the left-hand front wheel, remove the wheel trim if one is fitted, and the dust shield. The drive shaft nut is staked, so you'll need to de-stake it before you can slacken it. At the same time, slacken the road wheel nuts. Under the bonnet, detach the air intake pipe so you can get to the gear change cables. Detach the outer cables from their brackets and the inner cables from the transaxle linkages. At the left-hand powertrain mounting, slacken the 6 bolts arrowed, then remove the 4 bolts highlighted. At this stage, you should also remove all the bell housing bolts that you can reach from the top. Next, raise the vehicle and remove the left-hand front road wheel. Detach the clutch slave cylinder and secure it in a vertical position with the push rod uppermost so the fluid can't leak out. Before you go any further, drain the oil. Now you can remove the left-hand drive shaft. To do this, remove the 4 bolts which secure the ball joint to the knuckle. Then use a suitable pry bar to lever the knuckle clear and lever the left-hand drive shaft out of the transaxle. Make sure you don't trap and damage either gaiter while you do this. You can now pull the drive shaft clear of the knuckle and remove it from the vehicle. By the way, when you remove drive shafts, don't forget to plug the knuckle and the transaxle housing to prevent ingress of dirt. A plug like this will do. Next, you have to pull the right-hand drive shaft clear of the transaxle. Start by removing the retainer which holds the drive shaft centre support in place. Then release the right-hand knuckle just as you did on the left-hand side. But as you can see, you can leave the road wheel on this time. Use a soft hammer to tap the drive shaft clear, but take care not to damage the dirt shield on the shaft. And plug the transaxle aperture as we did on the other side. Remove the starter motor cables and the 3 securing bolts. The starter can now be removed. Disconnect the reverse light cable and the speed sensor cable. You also have to unclip the speed sensor cable from the casing. Next, remove the bolt which secures the engine rear mount to the engine. Now you have to fit an engine support bracket. But before you can do this, these 2 bell housing bolts must be removed. To remove the transaxle, first position the engine support bracket, as you see here. Then move a suitable transmission cradle into position and take the weight of the transaxle. At the left-hand mounting, remove the bolt arrowed, together with the 2 bolts you slackened earlier, and remove the mounting. To withdraw the transaxle, start to lower the cradle. When free, pull the assembly towards the front of the vehicle until the rear of the engine can be lowered securely onto the bracket screws, as you see here. Then remove the remaining bell housing bolts and lower the transaxle clear. At this stage, the engine is now securely supported, in case you have to work on the clutch, rear main oil seal, and so on. If you want to remove the clutch release bearing, you have to remove the release fork first. This is done by pulling these 2 pins apart. Before you start to refit the transaxle, clean the area around the vehicle speed sensor, then remove the sensor and put a temporary plug in its place to keep the dirt out. You're going to use the sensor aperture to fill with oil later. Refitting the transaxle is pretty much the reverse of the removal procedures, but there are some important points to bear in mind. The bell housing bolts have different sizes, so make sure you refit them in their correct positions. It's important to fit the left-hand mounting correctly. As you can see in this illustration, there must be an equal clearance on both sides. If you don't do this, you may build in a vibration. LDV dealers use this tool, which is fitted before tightening the bolts, to provide the necessary equal clearance. Incidentally, there is a similar requirement at the right-hand mounting. When you refit the left-hand drive shaft, you must renew the circlip at the inboard end, and position the circlip with its ends to the top. And make sure you don't damage the seal in the housing when you fit the shaft. When you fill the transaxle with oil, you must use the correctly specified type and the correct amount. Add the oil through the vehicle speed sensor aperture and refit the sensor. Then remove this level plug and allow any excess oil to run out. When you fit the drive shaft nut, it must be a new one. It has to be tightened to a very high torque using a 3-stage procedure, so we suggest you tighten it like this. By the way, the wheels are heavy, and because they're a bolt fixing rather than studs, LDV dealers have found these dummy studs very useful to guide wheels on. Fit the road wheel and tighten the bolts. Then lower the lift to the ground. Tighten the driveshaft nut to 350 Newton meters. Raise the vehicle. Turn the road wheel several times to track in the hub bearings. Then lower it again and tighten finally to 450 Newton meters. At the same time, you can torque tighten the road wheel bolts. And don't forget to stake the drive shaft nut before you refit the dust cap.